Hey everyone! If this is your first time here, let me introduce myself. I'm Eileen Smith, and on this channel, we talk about all things digital media. So consider me as your digital media tour guide. Now, this is the Miss Eileen Speaks YouTube channel, but I also have a podcast called Miss Eileen Speaks. And today we're going to talk about podcasting. Now, I know a lot of you out there are already podcasting or you're thinking about starting a podcast. So today's episode, we're going to dive into your podcast descriptions. Optimizing your podcast descriptions. You know, a lot of times here we're talking about YouTube and optimizing your descriptions here on YouTube. Well, podcasting needs to be optimized as well, because when you're doing a podcast, you have so many different ways that your listeners can be consuming your content. Okay, so that's really important for you to know where they're consuming your content. And so today, what we're going to do, we're going to look at a podcast that's even more popular than mine. And that would be my daughter. My daughter is Nicole Purvey, and she's the host of the Better Than Success podcast. But before we get into looking at her podcast, let's take a look at this article that was put together over at Pod News. And over at Pod News, they took a behind the scenes look at 19 different podcasting apps. That's a lot of apps. There was a lot of work that went into this, because some apps will show your description. They will include the hyperlinks. They will include all of your text formatting. So if you are telling people to go over to your website, they can easily click on that link. Or if you're telling people to sign up for your email list, they can easily click on that link if the app they are using has the proper formatting. So that's why it's important for us to know what apps have what formatting, and then later on we're going to look to see what apps people are using to consume the content. So let's first take a look at this article over on Pod News. And we got the wrong screen share up. Hang on, no problem. We'll get the right one in 1 second. Okay, here it is. It's Pod News, and we're going to try to optimize that so you guys can see it a little bit better. All right, and we'll zoom in some. And I see some of my friends are here in the chat, and I'll bring up the chat in a little bit, guys. But I want to say hi to Tish and Rob and Rodney and Katie. Thank you so much for coming, guys. So now this is how podcast show notes display in 19 different apps. Now I realize that the type is small, so I just want to go down to where he's got all the screenshots. For example, this is how it looks in a very popular app called Pocket Cast, and then Overcast. Okay, so we're going to scroll down to some of the more popular apps that you may even be using. For example, here's Apple Podcasts on iOS 11. I see Larry Snow just came in. Hello, Larry. Here's the Podbean app. That's one I've been talking about a lot on my other podcast, which is called Free Podcast Host. Little plug there for that. This is the Podcast Go app on Android. So now let's try to get down. There's Google Play. Let's try to get to the podcast app. Here's the podcast app here. Okay, guys? So let's zoom in on that, because that's probably one of the most popular. Oh, this is a podcast app on Android. Okay. That's okay. But I just want you to see the care that this young fellow put into making this article. He took screenshots from all these apps and then he tells you. On this particular one, this is a podcast app for Android where only 2 of the 5 URLs are clickable. Like, I don't know what's behind the minds of these folks that put together these podcast apps. Like, why would only 2 of 5 be clickable? I don't know. Here's Stitcher. Stitcher is a very popular app, and it's one that people use to consume podcasts a lot when they don't have an iPhone. So Stitcher says, on Android, 2 of 5, no links are clickable, no formatting is respected, no line breaks, accented characters display. Oh gosh, it's just all over the place. Spotify. You guys may be familiar with the fact that Spotify is starting to let more and more podcasters in on their platform, and it's starting to really grow, even though, it's nowhere near iTunes and Apple Podcasts, don't get me wrong. But it's becoming number 2 in a lot of the stats that we're hearing. So Spotify, no luck. They give you absolutely no links and there's no formatting. So people need to really work. This is why it's really important for you to know, as a podcaster, for you to know where people are subscribing. All right, let's go back to Apple Podcasts. Here's the main one, okay? This is numero uno, King of the Hill. And this one, the links are clickable. Of course, they're going to open up in Safari, right? Because you can't change your default browser on the iPhone. Larry Snow and I went through that little exercise a while back because we were trying to figure out if there was some kind of a hack, but nah, no soup for us. Apple doesn't want us to do that. Okay, so now you've seen that there's difference. So what you need to do, next step, is to go into your stats. Because even though we hear Rob Walsh from Libsyn, he runs down the stats every 2 weeks on the feed. That's their podcast. We may listen to Todd Cochran from Blueberry and Rob Greenlee. They have a show called The New Media Show, and they may talk about stats. But they're giving an overall view. You have to look at your own stats because your stats may be totally different because it all depends upon your audience. How tech savvy are they? Maybe you have a podcast that's about Android. So what do you think? Are most of your listeners going to be using Apple Podcasts? Nope. Okay, so you all need to pay attention to your consumption and where your listeners are coming from. Okay, so real quick, I do want to, like I said, since we are going to be looking at her stats, I better give my daughter a little bit of a extra plug here and show you her podcast, and we'll see what her podcast looks like. Now, this is the Apple Podcast app. Now, I got to be perfectly honest with you. Full disclosure, I don't use this app to listen to podcasts. I literally downloaded a few episodes just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if I can do a little picture-in-picture, even though that might be a little weird because I'm turned to the side. Hey, Patricia. I see Patricia's here now too. Okay, so now let's go into her latest episode where she interviewed Andre Hatchett. He does courses and things. So now you can see that those links are clickable. So, she's included in her show notes, the episode notes for this episode. She's giving him a shout out. He's going to be one of the speakers at the Entrepreneurs and Leaders Conference. And I also heard that those two are doing a webinar together where they're going to talk about making money from an online course, which I know you guys are interested in that too. So anyway, you'll see that she's got his links there. Now, she's got a lot of text, but the Apple Podcast app does recognize the formatting. Now, I notice here there's also some timestamps in here, but I don't think Apple Podcasts recognizes that. Okay, I'll hover over, even though it's a little off where I'm actually hovering. There you go. I don't think Apple Podcasts is picking up on those timestamps. I do know that Overcast is a different app, does pick up on the timestamps. So anyway, but she's got calls to action there. All right. Because she's also recording this podcast over on YouTube. We all love that. We're digital media divas. Okay. My daughter and I. So now she's got a link there to make sure that people can go over to YouTube and watch the video version of the podcast. So my point here is just to say to you, have your calls to action, whatever that call to action may be, so that if your audience is using Apple Podcasts, it's really important for you to format your show notes with those hyperlinks. And I got to be honest, I got more to show you guys on the screen share, but I can't take it. I got to see what my audience is over here saying, and I got to give some shout outs. So I'm going to screen share the chat as soon as I figure out. It's kind of hard for me to figure out without my glasses on. So let me stop trying to be cute. So I can get my peeps up here. Let's see. Is this, pop out. There we go. Hey, everybody. Even the Nightbot is here. And because I forgot to reconfigure him, he's turning up when I don't want him to. Okay, so here we go. People have soup. Tish, you use it for your Spotify for listening to music. And let's see, what else is being said here? Rodney, I'm not sure if you have a podcast yet, but hey, that's something you may want to look into. Another way to get your content out there. And podcasting and YouTube kind of are great ways to promote one content on the other platform. They kind of, link up a little. So, and it's easy to repurpose. Like I was just saying about my daughter, she is recording her podcast live. Because, she hired a videographer, okay? Everybody can't do that. But even when you're doing these types of videos with the screen sharing and so forth, you can have them on YouTube, extract that audio, and turn them into a podcast. So there's not a whole lot of extra work. Hey, look, our friends Owen at Odin Video and Nick Nimmin, they're doing that, right? So we know a lot of folks doing that. I just wanted to give those two a shout out because I like them. All right, so Rob Fuzz, like the cops, is here. And Katie. Hello, my love. Okay. So let's see. All right, so Rodney said he's looking into it. Wonderful, my dear. Okay, let's change to a different layout here. There you go. So the next thing I want to share with you guys is the stats, okay? Because I was going to show my stats, but they're not that great, and they're not that typical. So, but I do want you to keep in mind that you have to look at your own stats. Even though I'm going to share some stats with you here, I want you to keep in mind that your stats are what are important. Okay? So, just want to show you how to look at your stats if you're on Libsyn, because we went over this before, but Libsyn has a brand new dashboard now for stats. So, just want to make sure you guys know how to check them out. Okay, let me really quickly read. Larry says Spotify seems to pull in excerpts versus the blog posts like Apple and Overcast does. Well, Larry, Spotify probably has a character limit. And in this article, Rodney, so do you need to upload to all the different apps, or is there a way to do it at once? No, there's no way to do it at once. However, if you are on Libsyn, There is a lot of what they call destinations inside of Libsyn. For example, you can go to Spotify. That's one of their destinations. You can go to we're getting ready to go in the back end of Libsyn, so let's just check that out real quick. Because off the top of my head, even though I know the answer to that question, you kind of threw me off for a second there. It's okay though. It's okay because it's perfectly on topic. It's just not anything I expect anybody to ask me. So that's okay. Let me get the screen share to going now. Hopefully I can share the right screen, even though I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I haven't figured out how to change it prior to actually sharing it. And it's just user error. Here we go. Here's stats, okay? And we'll go into the destinations in a minute, Rodney, because that's important. So I want you to know about that. So let's make them bigger. Now, up at the top, you're just going to see, your number of downloads. Nicole's podcast is doing so well. Okay. This episode that just went out 5 days ago has already got 350 downloads, which is really great. And there's one here that was all the way up to 660. All right. But that's not what I wanted to just show you guys. What's important here? All right, this is telling you the destinations. You can set up Twitter so it can automatically tweet, Rodney. That's one of the destinations, right? It can automatically tweet the podcast out, or you can go in there and tweet. But I don't see the point of going in there to do a tweet. But you can make it so that it automatically tweets every time you upload and publish a new episode. Now, the Libsyn Classic feed, that's the one that's going out to all these apps, which I'm getting ready to show you. Okay, then they give you the country breakdown. And it's interesting, especially since Nicole's podcast is pretty much a local podcast. But there's so much interest that even folks over in Russia and in China and Australia are listening to the show, which is good because it's great information in the show. So now here's where Nicole's podcast is a lot more like a traditional podcast. Okay, different from mine's. So hang on one second. Let me just line things up here because I'm in the way. All right, let me move over so you can see. And let me make myself a little bit smaller. All right. Okay, so Apple Core Media, that basically just means Apple. Okay, so there could be many different things on Apple, including iTunes. All right. So, don't worry too much about that kind of stuff. Just notice the ones that really stand out. For example, you've got Apple Core Media, iTunes Store, and iTunes. These are all the same thing. Okay. Then you've got Stitcher. Now, we saw earlier that Stitcher doesn't include the links. Even though it's the second, because I'm going to lump all three of these together, but they're so far behind because look, she's got 7,800 views in Apple, listens in Apple Core Media, plus another 950. So that's another 1,000. So now we're up to almost 9,000 and then 695. All right. So now that's like 10,000 roughly. And so the next one's only 335. So she doesn't really have to worry about Stitcher too much. It's nice for her to let people know they can go to Stitcher and all that, but there's no reason for her to do a big push for Stitcher, especially since Stitcher doesn't format the text. So people don't know to click on a link and go visit a website or to sign up for her email list or whatever calls to action she puts in a specific episode. All right. That's why it's important for everybody to look at their own stats. Okay. So one more thing I want to do is just go down a little bit more and just show you, for example, you see Chrome. That means people are listening from the website. Great. You don't have to worry about it in that case because they're seeing the blog post. And that's definitely got all the links and all that stuff. Okay? No problem. There's other apps like Castbox, and there's Twitter bot, there's Podcast Ad. All these other apps are good, but they're so small in comparison that she knows that she needs to focus on that Apple audience. Apple Podcasts, iTunes audience is numero uno for Nicole. So now let me come back on cam real quick before I go into the destinations, because that's important. And in fact, I may even go into destinations over on my account because I'm not sure what destinations Nicole has set up. In fact, be honest with you, I'm not even sure all the destinations I have set up. Oh gosh, I'm so bad. All right. And while we're waiting for that, let's see. We're going to bring up the chat real quick too. All right. So Rodney, so you need to upload. I'm answering that question now, Rodney. But first, I'm going to show you what Libsyn can do, and then we'll also get into the other places that you can upload to as well. Okay. And Tisha saying, yay, Nicole. Yes, Larry. Thanks for looking to that. What up? Get a podcast host like Libsyn for sure. And I have a code for you. And in fact, I'm going to type it in the chat. And I have to remember to type it in the chat and not on Ecamm. SOP free. That's my friend Dave Jackson's code. When you check out at Libsyn, you'll get a free month and plus some extra time. Like, depending upon when in the month that you sign up, you'll get the rest of that existing month and the next month for free. So that gives you plenty of time to decide if if podcasting is really for you. Okay. So let me make myself a little bit bigger. And I think I need to put myself on this side before I show. All right. So now let's go into our Libsyn. Okay, Eileen's stats are nothing like Nicole's, but that's okay, because Eileen got more YouTube stats than Nicole. We're not even going to show you Nicole's YouTube stats. She just started her channel, so wouldn't even be fair. All right, so here's the thing that's called destinations. All right, so we're going to look at this. I think this is the list to show you all of them. Yeah, I think this list will show all the destinations. I'm not 100% sure of that, but let's just look at what they have here. These are the ones that I'm using: the Android app, the iPhone, iPad, Libsyn Classic feed, and I'll show you guys that in a minute. The Microsoft Windows app, which people don't even talk about that anymore. The podcast page. Oh, this is the one I want to show you, is the podcast page. So if you're someone who doesn't have a website and you want to use Libsyn, don't worry, because Libsyn will give you a website. This is part of what you pay for with Libsyn. Now, I'm not sure if it's included in all plans, but I'm going to tell you right now, don't even look at the $5 plan. Just don't even look at it. If you want to be cheap, then don't get into podcasting. Seriously. Okay. Go ahead and get either the $15 or the $20 plan. And I really recommend the 20 if you're doing video podcasting, because you can do a video podcast. Then you want to look at the higher plans. But just go with the 15 if you really strapped. But don't even waste your time with the $5 option. Okay? Because you're not going to get stats. All right. So let's say you have the $20 plan. You listen to Miss Eileen and you say, okay, Miss Eileen knows what she's talking about. So here you go. This is what the page looks like. All right. And so now I could format this stuff inside of Libsyn. And I think I have. So what I've done, because I actually do have a website. I really want people to go over to my website. So I made a short link, and then you go over to my website, and then that's where you get all the full show notes. All right. So, like I said, I have a small podcast audience right now. I don't know how many people are doing that, and I probably should look at my stats one day to see just how effective all that is. But let's go back to destinations. All right. So I think I need to go to add new destinations to see the full list. Yep, that's what I needed to do. So here's to answer your question, Rodney. I know I took forever getting here, didn't I? All right. You can have a podcast source app listing. That's fine. The iPhone or iPad app. All right. That I think costs extra. Spotify, which is free, and I need to sign up for Spotify, and my daughter does too. Google Play Music, iHeartRadio. Now, iHeartRadio, I think you need to be approved to get into that. There's Twitter, WordPress. So if you had a WordPress.com, you could use that. Libsyn does have a plugin if you have self-hosted WordPress, but this is referring to WordPress.com. Facebook, Blogger, SoundCloud, Tumblr, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So now, for those of us who are YouTube purists, we probably will not want to take an audio podcast and put it up on YouTube. However, I was listening to some stats the other day that there are a couple of podcasts where people are literally sending their audio podcasts and they're getting tons of views on YouTube. Because what it does, you can upload a thumbnail image, a YouTube-sized thumbnail image, because your podcast image is square. YouTube is 16:9 ratio, right? So it's 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720, and on and on and on, right? So you can upload different images for each destination. If there's any differences in the layout of the app or destination that you're sending it to, they give you the ability to do that. And I guess it's possible to get some traction over on YouTube because some folks are just like me who really likes to consume content on YouTube. I like the YouTube interface. I like the way I can cast it easily over to my smart TV. So when I do want to step away from the computer, I have it there. And, I just like the player on YouTube. And I have YouTube Red, so I don't have to ever worry about commercials. Some folks don't like that. So it's all about your audience. It's all about your audience. I'm going to say that one more time. It's all about your audience. Like I know that you guys like YouTube.